welcome to Appointed Counsel, a podcast presented by Tennessee Court Talk for those involved in indigent representation. I'm Joe Byrd, lead attorney for the Indigent Services Team of the Tennessee Administrative Office of the Courts. Episode 17, Child Welfare Claims and Supplier Information. Well, in these podcasts, we're talking to individual members of the Indigent Services Team, our auditors, as we call them, who review claims, not just so that we can get to know them, although that's part of what this podcast is all about, but also so that they can maybe reach out and talk to the lawyers who file the claims, so maybe we can give them some pointers or ideas, things that the auditors see from their side, and so that maybe the attorneys can keep their claims moving as fast as possible through the system. So today, I have on this podcast two great guests. Their desks are right next to each other. They're comrades in crime, I call them. They're not real crime, obviously. We have today Alyssa Hudson and Kendall Leslie. I'm going to start with Kendall. Kendall is really not new to our team at all, but is one of the newest to the team who started after me. So Kendall, welcome. We're glad you're here today.
Thank you.
And tell the attorneys today what you do. What is your job?
Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Kendall Leslie. I work with the dependency neglect for the Indigent Services Team. And I also do child welfare.
Right, and that includes termination of parental rights,
termination,
dependency,
complex and extended claims, things like that.
And we spoke with Gene Vestal in an earlier podcast, and he called himself a first-line auditor. So
yes,
you are the first one that sees the claims,
first reviewer,
right?
Yes, that's right.
And then Alyssa Hudson. Alyssa and I started, it's the same day, I think, 2 years ago, almost to the day that we're recording this. And you weren't Alyssa Hudson then, you were Alyssa Parsley then. And but
the name change may confuse some people.
Yeah. So Alyssa, if I can say this, got married since she's been here at the AOC, and we're so happy for her. And but what do you do here at the AOC?
So I am a first-line auditor for the Indigent Services Team for non-capital claims, and then I also work with our fiscal division with Supplier maintenance.
And so we heard from Gene talking about the non-capital claims. So we may not go into that so much. We might want to just pick your brain a little bit on what you do in working with our fiscal division. And when you say fiscal, you mean fiscal division here at the AOC, right?
Yes, with the AOC, correct.
And so we'll pick your brain just a little bit. Now, before we get to that, though, Kendall, I want you to tell us a little bit about your experience and background before you came to the AOC. What were you doing before you came here?
Yeah, so before this, I was a data analyst for HCA Healthcare, and I was essentially working with members to handle resolved disputes and medical supplier contracts like LOCs.
And then prior to that, what were you doing?
So I was working in security with this company called CGI, and I was basically processing different background checks and investigations for people to get public trust clearances or other higher clearances that they need.
So all the security clearances for the federal government and those kinds of things. So you were doing background checks, then you were working for a health insurance company. Really, what we do is kind of not something that was outside of your wheelhouse per se, because you were used to doing some of this kind of work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And Alyssa, you had a background a little different than some of the other auditors. What were you doing before you came to the AOC?
Yes, so prior to the AOC, I was in the banking industry for a few years, and I think that helps with the fiscal side of it, supplier maintenance, like with W-9s, 1099s, things like that.
Yeah, I like to say that you can speak that fiscal language.
Yes.
So there's two languages that are still like ancient Ugaritic to me, and that is the information technology, IT language. I get lost. They have to dumb it down for me here at the AOC. And then fiscal, in their accounting language. They have to dumb it down for me so that I understand everything. But I have a general understanding. So, Kendall, you were telling us a little bit about dependency neglect and termination of parental rights. But I want to focus in on dependency neglect cases. We have inside baseball, kind of our language, phase 1, phase 2. And I think it might be an ACAP, phase 1, phase 2. What do we mean by phase 1, phase 2?
So phase 1 basically is the predisposition.
Okay, and predisposition, if I'm not mistaken, from the law when I did this 20 years ago, it hasn't changed. There's an adjudication in which the attorney or in which the child is determined if they are dependent and neglected, and then there's the disposition, meaning where does the child go, and so sometimes the adjudication and disposition happen in the same hearing on the same day. Sometimes it's later, but we go by, did you say the file stamped date on that final
Right.
dispositional order?
Yes.
And so they have 180 days
Yes.
to file their claim after the file stamp date on that final dispositional order. Now, what about phase 2? What's phase 2?
It's the post disposition.
So basically after the dispositional order goes down, there's a lot of work. In fact, we're going to have an opportunity to go and observe a juvenile court as a team coming up real soon from the date of our podcast that we're recording this. But there's work that goes on. Once a disposition goes down, it's not like the child just goes to this new home. There's actually work that has to go on that the attorney or the guardian ad litem is involved in, and we're going to come to that in a minute. The work that has to go, they have these different meetings they have to go to. They have to stay in touch with the child. So these post-dispositional claims that come in on these cases, what is their disposition date?
Last activity.
Yeah, last activity. That's why when they're complex and extended, right, I look over the complex and extended. I think I get them before you do, right? When they come in, they go to the judge, then they come to me when they're complex and extended claims. If they have checked that complex box, sometimes you have to return quite a few claims when they forget to check that box. Right. But when I see them, I love seeing phase 2 because all I have to do is look on the activities and look, when was the last activity date? And if it's close to that disposition date, I know I got a timely claim and I can move faster. Phase 1 for me is slower, right? Because I got to look to see where was that adjudication date. And then, as we were talking in some previous podcasts, as the disposition date gets closer to that 180th day, we might ask them for that final dispositional order for those phase 1. Phase 2 is easy because it's based on last activity, as long as they put the last activity down. So now we talked about, you said complex and extended, and I just said it too. Complex and extended, they check the box. They have to have a complex and extended order that has to be signed before the claim is approved in ACAP by the judge. And I hate when we have to not approve those complex claims because that's double what the default rate is. So I hate that when it happens. But now we talked about we've mentioned GALs or guardian ad litems because in these claims there are both attorneys and guardian ad litems, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And you see, you do claims for both the attorneys that represent the parents as well as the guardians ad litems that represent the children, right?
Right.
And claims may look different. We have the same rate and caps for the attorneys who do those assignments, both representing the parents and the children. But it might be very different work, and sometimes we see it differently. Let me ask you, when you're doing the claims, and I see the complex and extended, and I just mentioned one, they fail to check the complex box, so then it routes automatically. Instead of coming to me, it routes to you, and then sometimes we may, because you have so many claims, you've got about 250 a week you have to do.
Right, yeah.
So you may just go ahead and process it under the default cap, and then what we try to do is catch it and send it back and return it to them so they can just check the box and then route it to me so I can review it. But what else do you see in terms of why you have to return claims?
I think some of the main reasons would be for case numbers that don't match up with the appointment order versus the properties tab. And that also includes like the parents or the children. Some children aren't listed on different TPR orders or phase 2 or something of that sort.
Yeah, that's good. Let me stop you right there for a minute because Gene Vestal in my conversation with him, he mentioned the case numbers matching on the properties tab, and we talked about that, about the comptroller making sure that we're enforcing and reviewing, and we have to make sure those numbers match. And even F&A, Finance and Administration, may kick some back to us if they're closely reviewing them. But you mentioned this putting the children's name and the parent's name What are you talking about there? Be a little more specific about that.
Yeah, so on the properties tab, basically when an attorney is representing a parent, to be specific, they list the parent, but you also have to make sure that you're adding the children on the properties tab as well, because the children are also they're shown on the appointment order as well. So you have to make sure that you have both.
And so sometimes this was always confusing when I first came for attorneys, because they had to put the birthdays down, right, on the properties tab. And then it used to be that we would make them redact the birthdays off the orders. And that used to be the number one reason we had to return claims was redaction. So, but now the redaction on orders is no longer necessary. And so we would get asked why. Why do you want us to put the birth date down on the properties tab, but we had to redact it off? Well, it had to do with the fact that the orders were going over, and they weren't being ever given out, but they were always going over into F&A, and so we had to have that identifying information redacted. The properties tab has to have it because the comptroller wants us to prove that these are actually child welfare cases. And the only way to do that is to really put in the child's birthday so that we can say they're a minor. We obviously know they're a minor. So, okay, what other reasons do you return claims that you see sometimes?
I would probably say just simple misspelling. I mean, we have to make sure that the names line up and that they line up in the sense of being on the properties tab and also on the appointment order as well.
Now, that's not like if they forget the middle name or middle initial or something. You're talking about
their full name.
Yeah, a misspelling of their full name.
Right.
And there again, that's because the comptroller's office requires that. Alyssa, before I go to the real thing I wanted to talk to you about today, a certain area of specialties that you have, I want to ask you the same questions I've been asking Kendall about when you return claims for attorneys. What are some of the main reasons you return claims?
I think one of the main reasons we return claims is the final order. If you think that your claim is getting close to that 180-day mark, please go ahead and upload the final order, because that will save the attorney and us both time, because if we have to send it back to you, that's going to delay processing for payment. So please go ahead and upload the final order if you think that your claim is getting close to the 180-day mark.
Yeah, that's excellent, because a lot of attorneys don't realize this, but when we return a claim, it's not like they just return it back to us. It has to go all the way back through the judges.
Through the loop.
Right, and then that slows it down. If the judge is on vacation or isn't able to get, or sometimes the judge is thinking, I've already approved this claim. Is this second claim coming through? Why am I doing that? So it's better if you get close. Like I think a general rule of thumb, if I was around the 150, 160th day, I would just go ahead and upload that final order. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so, because then you know it's going to be addressed. And in the criminal non-capital world, you're looking at the file stamp date on the judgment. Now, if it was a criminal trial and they file a motion for new trial, what happens then? What's the disposition date set by then?
It's the order denying or granting the motion.
So it's not just the final judgment. That final judgment, in certain circumstances, might be extended. The date might be extended, because a motion for new trial would obviously extend the disposition date. Another thing that can happen, and I think both of you are trained on this, is that in certain kinds of orders there might be contingencies. We call them inside baseball. Attorneys wouldn't know what that means, but if there's like a status hearing that's set in the order, or if the final order says something about that there's going to be it's a diversion and there's a possibility of this being taken off the person's record or something like that, then we won't say that that's the final order, because they have another hearing, right? Yep. And then that extends it. But those are pretty rare. Basically, we go probably 95% of the claims are based on that final judgment order. So any other reasons you think that you return claims?
I think another big one would be expenses. So like parking, for instance. You get up to $20 a day for parking, but we still do need that receipt. So go ahead and upload any receipt you have for any expenses, because that's another reason we have to send claims back if we're missing receipts.
Yeah, missing receipts. If I put down $25 a day, you're not going to send back the claim, though, are you?
Nope, we'll just deduct it.
Yeah, you just reduce that down to the $20, right?
Yeah.
So, and the attorneys might not like that. They might say, I want to know, but the fact is we're doing what Rule 13 requires.
Exactly.
And it's really to their advantage, because if we return it, then we're going to fall out of our 30, right? We're going to move out of our 30 days.
Yep.
So, all right. So let's talk about that other part of your life, which is the people in our fiscal division. They're actually in the AOC. They're wonderful people. We like working with them. They help us. They're a constant support to us. The people over in finance and administration, that's a separate agency from us. They're the ones who actually cut checks or make the deposits into the attorney's accounts.
Exactly.
And so, but they're great people, but they also have regulations and rules that they have to follow. The IRS regulations, in addition to the regulations that are set out by state law and by state regulation. But those are three different entities that we have to communicate, and we're not unique in that. So other agencies, finance and administration, it basically takes care of the payments for almost all state agencies.
Yes.
So the common problems that attorneys have that might relate to what we call supplier information would be common with all agencies. And in an earlier podcast earlier this year, we spoke with Shoni in the fiscal division, who used to be with us, and she talked a little bit about supplier information. But I want to hear from your side, because you're the person who kind of is a first line for our team who has to deal with attorneys relating to these kinds of issues. So tell us a little bit about how that works, what you do, and how all of that flows.
So as a first line auditor and then working with our fiscal department, I see both sides of it. So if an attorney needs to be paid and they have an address update waiting, I have to go in and request a new W-9 for the attorney, because they're not getting paid when they're in this modified status waiting for the address update.
And just to interrupt you there, modified status is something we put them in ACAP, which means we freeze all claims
all
and processing.
claims are frozen. You do not get paid until this correction is made.
But that's to their benefit and to their security, because
yes, it is.
We're trying not to pay the wrong person or send a check to the wrong
could be sent
account
to
or
the
whatever.
wrong address or things like that.
So you mentioned a change of address. Are there other kinds of change of information that might trigger that they need a new W-9?
Any change on your ACAP account, so whether that's your address, email address, and I see a lot of attorneys go into their ACAP account and change this themselves, and that will put them automatically in that modified status, and a lot of times they won't contact us, so it is extremely important for them to contact us if they make a change, because that could go unnoticed for weeks.
And how do they contact us?
They can reach out to our fiscal vendor updates, or they can reach out to Amy Park or our W-9, which is our fiscal department.
Okay, and we'll have, they can find those email addresses on the Indigent website, I think.
Yes, they can. Mm-hmm.
So if you have I guess the best advice you could give to attorneys is if you change your bank account, you change your address, you change firms, you assume that you have to do a W-9,
any
reach out
change,
to us.
any change like that.
So when they do the W-9, we try to send them some instructions because there are some real particular things that have to be done.
Very
right?
particular.
Do you require that? Is that your requirement?
No, and I would make it a lot simpler if I could.
Right, and we as lawyers, we hate filling out forms anyway, but we try to also think that this form should be just self-explanatory.
Yes.
I know what this is, but they need to really pay attention to those instructions. Once they do that and we send that W-9 on, where does that W-9 go?
So if they send it to me, I forward it to our fiscal department, and then from there it is sent over to F&A, which is Finance and Administration, and they review the W-9 for any errors, anything like that. And if it does come back with an error, it's the chain backwards. It goes from them to our fiscal department to me, and that's when I would reach out to them if there's an error.
And sometimes there can be a change that not only puts them in modified status in ACAP, but there could be a change that actually makes their Edison account, which is the program that is the payment processing program for the state that puts them in an inactive status. Like if a 1099 form gets returned, if a check gets returned, or they get something, a letter gets returned
a closed bank account, all kinds of stuff can flag that.
And so, but basically, we lose control.
Yes, exactly.
We lose control of the W-9, and then when it comes to that information, correcting it in Edison, they have to deal with finance and administration, right?
Yes.
As of the date of this podcast, I know that finance and administration is a little behind in terms of responding to vendors, but you can imagine they have thousands and thousands of vendors across the state of Tennessee.
Yep, the whole state they deal with.
Yeah,
so that's a lot of information coming in.
All these agencies. And so it takes them a while to get back. And I know it's so frustrating I understand the frustration of an attorney.
Me too.
You've waited till the end of a case that could have gone on for 2 years, and now you're waiting to get paid, and it's beyond the 30 days that the AOC promised, but it's out of the AOC's hands.
Exactly.
And, it's like, why can't someone just push a button? I'll hear someone say.
I wish I could. I would do it if I could.
Right? But in an F&A, they can't, because they're trying to handle all of the things that they have to in order. So it just takes a while sometimes. So the key is try for attorneys, I think, to be proactive on this.
Exactly. Just keep your information up to date. And they do work things in the order in which they receive. So if you send your information in last week, they're not going to be getting to it anytime soon.
Yeah. Well, on that point, if you were going to give some tips for attorneys in general, not just about supplier information, but W-9s, but also about claims or anything, and I'll be coming back to you on this, Kendall, too. What would be some advice? I know we've talked about why they return claims, but what would be some advice that you would give to attorneys as it relates to claims or supplier information?
Regarding the supplier information, just please make sure your information is up to date. That will save us a lot of time and hassle, and we're trying to get you paid as soon as possible. We're not trying to delay payment at all. And then in regards to claims, I would say if you have any kind of expenses, go ahead and upload the receipt. If we don't need it, we can always unfile the document. So we'd rather have it on there than have to send it back to you and you have to upload it. And then another one is the final order. If your case is getting close to that 180-day mark, please, please, please go ahead and upload the final order.
Yeah, avoid the return as much as you can,
Mm-hmm.
especially because if it's a complex and extended order, I can only get to my queue usually once a week.
Yep.
So you can almost assure if they see that I've approved something within the day or two that they were just lucky, they got it in the day that I was doing those. But just waiting, that's 5 or 6 days because of all my other responsibilities that I have that I can get to mine. Okay, Kendall, you're going to take us out here. So what advice would you give to attorneys in terms of filing claims in the child welfare cases?
I think my biggest would be to make sure that the claims, if they're nearing to 180 days or just at any point in time before then, to make sure to upload the adjudication order just in case, so it won't be returned.
Yeah, and I think that's right. Both of you have said that. I think that's right for me too. I think that it just answers a lot of questions. If I were king for a day and somebody on the podcast would ask me from complex and extended, what I would tell attorneys, oh, wait, I am king for the day and I can say what I think they should do. Make sure the judge signs that complex and extended order before they submit the claim, because the last thing I want to do is to take half of their money away. The thing I know you guys have it a little different. Your queues are never empty. You have hundreds of claims because you got to hit 250 every week, just so for us to stay on target. But I can empty my queue usually when I sit down and look at it. And for me, I want to go to the claims that I know are going to be, I can just approve, look at them and approve. I'm like you. I don't want to hold up their money. And then I probably need some therapy. I like my queue empty. You know, I don't think I could
Right.
do what you all do because you all live with constantly. It's just a flood of claims coming in. You never see the end of it. I have to see my queue empty at some point in time, or it would drive me nuts. And I don't want to see them slowed down. I want them to get as much money as Rule 13 will allow them to. So, I really appreciate you both being part of the podcast today. Kendall, thank you for all you do for child welfare cases. You don't realize it, but you're actually helping across the state of Tennessee. And you too, I tell you, Alyssa, you help us in so many ways, not only in terms of the claims with non-capital, but helping. And I know sometimes you get the frustration from the attorneys. Thank you for being just your sweet, bubbly self that you are on our team, and always kind to people. We appreciate your patience with everyone. So thank you for being on the podcast today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
For more information, check out the Indigent Representation webpage at tncourts.gov.